What is going on, guys? Welcome to my recap of college football week 9. Had a lot of good top 25 games. Starting off with the 12 o'clock games. Florida State at Wake Forest. Florida State won that game 41-16. It was a very good game for Florida State. They got out, were winning 34-7 at halftime. Jordan Travis played a pretty phenomenal game. 359 pass yards, 3 touchdowns. He might win the Heisman, but there's a lot of people who could possibly win the Heisman. But it was a good win for Florida State at Wake Forest. Kind of a test, just like Boston College, but this time they didn't only win by 2. They destroyed them. A good win for Florida State. They covered the spread too. Oklahoma going down to Kansas. I wouldn't necessarily say this was a shocker by the way Oklahoma played against UCF and how they played in this game. Oklahoma lost the game 33-38 against Kansas at Kansas. Kansas is now 6-2. These Big 12 teams are coming up. They're like right outside the top 25 or right inside the top 25. You have Kansas at 6-2. You got Kansas State at 6-2. You got Oklahoma State at 6-2. You also have BYU. They're 5-3. They could have been 6-2 if they beat Texas, but that's not going to happen. Oklahoma, Texas going down the same week. That's not going to happen. But Oklahoma, Dylan Gabriel, he was 14 for 19. They didn't throw the ball much. It was a very weird game because the weather was bad, and they just ran the ball a lot. This is one of their best rushing games of the season. It might actually be their best, but Dylan Gabriel did throw a pick 6, which might have cost Oklahoma that whole game. It gave Kansas the momentum off the start. Kansas, they were starting to, it looked like Oklahoma was starting to take over the game, but in the second half, Kansas came out to play. Give props to them, winning the game 38-33. Oklahoma, I still think there's a path to the playoffs, but they have to win every single game. And they're going to need a little bit of help from other teams, but there's still definitely a path. They're not eliminated from the playoff contention. On to the next game, Indiana at Penn State. Penn State wins the game 33-24 in a very sloppy game for Penn State. I feel bad for that team because their defense is so talented, but their offense just lacks so many explosive plays. They have no explosive plays. They really lack on the offensive side. Drew Aller's not a great quarterback, though he did get a long bomb near the end of the game. It was a good pass. Finally got something going, but they hardly ever get big plays. They were tied in the fourth quarter, 24-24. Penn State and Indiana. Indiana had a chance to win that game. They really did. But Penn State, they scored a touchdown. Indiana had a chance to tie it and take it into overtime, but they stopped him. Got a safety. Penn State wins the game. And on to the next game. Number 1, Georgia, demolishing Florida. Very expected. Florida's not a great team. I mean, they have a good offense. They can throw the ball some, but Georgia's defense is too good. Along with their offense, been playing really good. Brock Bowers is out, and Georgia still proved a lot of haters wrong. I think Georgia's finally starting to prove themselves as possibly the number 1 team in the nation. But Michigan and Ohio State both have that argument for number 1, too, as they both are really good teams. You could also say Florida State, even though they had that game against Boston College, and they struggled against Clemson and Duke, but they still have a good resume. But Georgia, they got a tough test coming up against Missouri, and then they have to go on the road against Tennessee and play Ole Miss. They got a couple tough games left. I could possibly see them losing one of those games. They got a couple tough games. I know Georgia hasn't really played anybody until now, but their schedule at the end of the season is going to be tough. I mean, even at Georgia Tech, that's not going to be an easy game. I doubt they'll lose that, but it won't be an easy game. BYU at Texas, like I was talking about before. Texas, they won that game 35-6. Surprisingly held BYU to 6 points. I was expecting BYU to play a little better. I actually had Texas only winning this game by 4, which I might have been a bold pick, being Texas has been playing a lot better. And they were beating Houston pretty good. And Texas plays really good at home. That's the only reason they didn't blow out Houston. It's because they're at Houston, and Houston really, they played their best in that game at home. They played really well. But Texas, they won that game 35-6 against BYU. Don't count out Texas at home to blow out a team that's not the best. BYU is definitely not bad, but they do have a good offense, but they shut it down 35-6. I will say it's not super impressive because BYU is kind of streaky. They had games where they scored hardly any points. I mean, they scored 11 against TCU. So, I mean, that's not really good for BYU. Only scoring 6 against Texas, but it is what it is. And Oregon beating the shit out of Utah, 35-6. That just feels like another game where I have to say beating the shit out of them because that's what happened. 35-6, just like Texas at BYU. A lot of people expected this game to be closer. I mean, Pat McAfee himself said that Utah was going to win this game. He probably just did that because he didn't want to get booed out of the building by freaking Utah's crowd at game day. I don't want to say booed out of the building, but I don't know what else to say. But Oregon wins that game 35-6. Very dominant performance on both sides of the ball. Oregon is looking like one of the best teams in the country, one of the most complete teams. I think if they win out, which they have a shot at doing, if they play Washington again, they will win that game. I think they have a high shot at winning that game and getting into the playoffs. It's not going to be easy, but they can definitely do it. They got a couple tests with Oregon State and even USC, but they only have one road game left at Arizona State. Pretty good for Oregon. They got their tough games out of the way for the most part. And Notre Dame beating Pitt 58-7. That's really good. I wasn't expecting Pitt to keep this game super close. I mean, I had it a 2-touchdown game, but I was just thinking Pitt would score like a late touchdown or something. But Notre Dame, they won that game 58-7. It wasn't even close. Give props to Notre Dame. I've said it before, they're a good team, and they're better than their record. They've had a tough resume. They played a very tough schedule, and they were so close to winning that Ohio State game. If they win that Ohio State game, a lot of things could have changed. They could be 9-0 right now. Who knows? But Notre Dame wins that game 58-7. They got a test against Clemson next week. It'll be a physical game. It'll probably be more low scoring, like a 20-17 game. But I think Notre Dame, they'll win it. On to the next game, Duke losing to Louisville 23-0. I actually did not watch this game, but I'm surprised. Like Duke, I was given props to this team for the way they've played this season, but they're getting tired. Riley Leonard's playing through injuries. 121 pass yards, 9 for 23, 1 interception. Not a good game for him. I knew their offense wasn't that good, but 0 points is something else. Tulane going to Rice, winning that game 30-28. Good win for Tulane. I mean, they keep winning by like very close games, but I mean, I guess that's what's expected of Tulane. They played a lot of close games last year too. But Tulane won the game. I guess that's all that matters at this point. They're trying to play to win every game. They have a chance to win out and go 11-1 and possibly win the American Championship. But I don't know. SMU looks really good. SMU will definitely be in that American Conference Championship. It'll be Tulane versus SMU. Winner of that will be ranked. SMU is looking very improved. They look like a really good team. One of their 2 losses come to Oklahoma, who's a really good team. Despite their loss against Kansas, Oklahoma's still a good team. And give props to Tulane, 7-1 at the moment. Only loss coming to Ole Miss. USC and Cal, oh my god, what a game. This game is atrocious and fun at the same time, because like, I got a feel for USC fans. Going against bad teams, or not necessarily bad teams, but just mid teams, winning by like a couple points, coming back from behind, in like high-scoring 40-50 point games, and getting blown out by Notre Dame 48-20, losing to Utah. Like, this team had way higher expectations. You have so much talent on the team. You got like 5 stars on defense, and your defense still sucks. You need coaching changes at that team. That's really what it comes down to at this point. You need coaching changes. Lincoln Riley, I don't know what to say about that guy anymore. I don't want to be a hater, but I mean, I don't know what else to say. He's not doing a good job. He didn't do a good job at Oklahoma other than the offensive side. So USC wins the game 50-49 against Cal. Cal played a heck of a game. I will give them credit. Cal's not a terrible team. And give props to Cal. They're going to be in the ACC next year. I'm excited to see how they can do. They got a couple winnable games coming up against Washington State and Stanford. So that'll be good for them if they can win a couple more games. And Washington, they beat Stanford 42-33. Oh my god, Washington. Back-to-back weeks. How can you disappoint college football after beating Oregon, one of the best teams in the country, and then come back? 2 teams, 2 bad Pac-12 teams. The 2 worst teams of the Pac-12. And I don't really want to call any team in the Pac-12 bad, because a lot of these teams with only 1 loss, 2 losses, if they're in another conference, they would be 50-50 on their record probably. Maybe even better. But the Pac-12 is loaded this year. It really is. And Stanford, they're probably the worst team in the Pac-12, but they played Washington tough. I feel like their offense is getting going a little bit after that game against Colorado last week. Or 2 weeks ago. They had a bye week last week. Give props to Stanford, scoring 33 on Washington. At least Washington's offense played well. Michael Penix had 369 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception. But still, these interceptions are going to hurt him in the Heisman race, even if it's not that many. Because you have other quarterbacks who aren't really throwing any interceptions. But, I mean, it's a win. A win's a win. But I'm really scared for Washington. I want them to win out. I'm rooting for the Pac-12. I want a Pac-12 team in the playoffs. But if they don't deserve it, they don't deserve it. It's that simple. But I think the Pac-12 is different this year. But Washington's starting to make that look like a debatable topic. And on to the next game, Air Force beating Colorado State. Air Force is a good team. They're 8-0. I know they haven't played anybody. Their best wins against Wyoming. But they've dominated every game. They've won every game by at least 2 touchdowns, except for that game against Wyoming. And they are a good second half team. They've had close games at halftime, but they always pull away in the second half. They are a tough team. They have a good defense. And they can run the ball really well. They're the best rushing offense in the country. So give props to Air Force. They have a chance to go 13-0, winning their conference and making a New Year's Six Bowl, possibly being ranked in the top 10. Tennessee beating Kentucky. Give props to Tennessee. Another team you got to give props to. Beating Kentucky 33-27, beating them at Kentucky. Kentucky's been a tough place to play recently. I mean, look what they did to Florida at home. Florida's not a great team, but Kentucky's not really a great team either. So good game for Tennessee, winning 33-27. Joe Milton played a pretty decent game. He actually played a really good game. 18 for 21, 228 yards. He didn't have a whole bunch of pass yards, but it's because he doesn't need to pass the ball as much when you run the ball so well. That's what Tennessee's really good at, is running the ball. Also give props to Devin Leary for having a great offensive game. 28 for 39, 372 pass yards. It was a pretty decent game. I didn't even watch it, but I know it's a pretty decent game just looking at the stats and stuff. One game I did watch was number 3 Ohio State at Wisconsin. 24-10, Ohio State wins. There's really some question marks on this Ohio State team. Are they the best team in the country, or are they like the 5th to 10th best team in the country? I don't know. Their defense is really, really good. I will give props to their defense, but their offense, it has its struggles. Marvin Harrison Jr. really makes that offense look better than it is. But Kyle McCord's not a great quarterback. He's really not that good. And Ohio State, similar to Penn State, they lack explosive plays. They are better than Penn State on the offensive side, definitely. No questions about it. But is Ohio State going to be a team to win the national title? They still have Michigan. That's going to be their big test. Ryan Day really wants that game. I know he does. He wants to show that Ohio State is a physical team and they can compete with the absolute best. They got a tough resume this week, or this season. And this week, I could see them being ranked number 1 in the playoff poll just because of the resume. And I don't think Georgia's going to be ranked 1 anymore, because they're going to be looking at resumes, and it's a new poll, playoff poll. Maybe Georgia gets back on top, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm excited for that playoff poll. And on to the next game, Vanderbilt at number 12, Ole Miss. Ole Miss was actually winning this game 26-0 at halftime, but they only won the game 33-7 outright. And Ole Miss is a team that I haven't been watching much lately, because, I mean, they haven't really been doing much. They haven't really played anybody. They do have a couple of decent wins. I mean, I did watch the LSU game. They beat LSU 55-49 after that Alabama loss, and then they've won 3 in a row since then. They beat Arkansas and Auburn by 1 touchdown. They played at Auburn, which was kind of tough. But Auburn's not a great team, so I don't think Ole Miss is that good. I don't think they should be in the top 10. A lot of people think they should be ranked ahead of Oklahoma and Penn State, but I don't agree. They haven't had a super tough schedule. They have a good win against LSU and they lost to Alabama. That's the only games they've really played. I mean, they beat Tulane. I guess they did beat Tulane, but that was without Tulane's starting quarterback. So Ole Miss, they do have a couple more games. Texas A&M will definitely be a tough game. If they can beat Texas A&M, I think Ole Miss deserves more respect. They also have to play Georgia, and there's no doubt about it. If Ole Miss wins that game, Ole Miss is a legit team. If they can win against Texas A&M and beat Georgia, they are in the conversation. But, the problem with that is Alabama, they have that head-to-head against Ole Miss, and they're 1 game ahead of them on the record. They have 0 losses in the SEC. Ole Miss has 1 loss in the SEC, so Alabama would have to lose 2 games for Ole Miss to get in the conference championship. And I just don't see it happening. I do think Ole Miss will take another loss or 2, so Colorado at UCLA. Colorado, I mean, they're a very up and down team. They're very streaky. They look like a very good team sometimes, and then their offensive line just shows us why they're not a great team yet, why they're not a top 25 team yet. UCLA, also some questions on this team. Are they really a top 25 team? I don't know. Their defense is playing spectacular. I will give credit to their defense. Really good. They've had some quarterback issues, but I will give credit to Ethan Garbers. Played a pretty decent game. Played better than Dante Moore was. 20 for 27, 269 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Surprisingly a little lower scoring, 28-16, but UCLA gets the dub. Colorado, will they make a bowl game? I doubt it. They have a couple winnable games. I could see them going 5-7, but it's going to be tough for them to get 6-6. They have Oregon State, Arizona, Washington State. I think that Washington State game's winnable. I think that Utah game's winnable. Honestly, I think all of these games are winnable. It's not like they're playing out of the world teams. UCLA was a winnable game too, but they're not gonna be favored in any of those games. So I don't see Colorado winning 2 games out of 4. I could see them winning one more game and going 5-7. I was thinking they would be 7-5 after losing to Oregon and losing to USC. I was still thinking they'd be 7-5, but they're just not that good. They're not terrible, but they're not that good. So number 17, North Carolina at Georgia Tech. North Carolina loses in a very high-scoring shootout game, 42-46. And what do you expect from North Carolina at this point? I said it in my last video. I had North Carolina on upset alert. I did have them winning that game in a close game, but I said North Carolina, when they lose a game, they lose again, and they lose again, and they lose again, and they lose again. Maybe they don't lose that many times, but you get what I'm saying. North Carolina, when they lose games, they start to go downhill after being so hyped up, started the season 6-0, whatever, being ranked top 15. They lose a game and they go down. It's just how they've been. And they had 577 total yards, and they still lost that game. Georgia Tech had an insane 635 total yards. This North Carolina defense looked like it was not that bad and improving, but I don't know what to say at this point. North Carolina, they just choke. It's that simple. They're out of the top 25 now. So, no more conversation in the ACC. No more conversation for making the playoffs. Old Dominion at number 25, James Madison. Is James Madison a top 25 team? I don't know, but they are 8-0, and it's hard to keep an 8-0 team out that does have a couple, decent wins. Like Liberty, I know they're 8-0 and not ranked, but they're in the worst conference. Like I've never seen a conference that bad. But James Madison, they do have a win against a Power 5 school, and don't get me wrong, I know Virginia is not a good school, even though they have a win against North Carolina. They're not that good. But James Madison also has a win against Troy, who's been a pretty good group of 5 team. They have a really good defense. James Madison beat South Alabama, who beat Oklahoma State. But I don't really think South Alabama is better than Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State's a very improved team from where they were in that game. But still, James Madison's 8-0. They've had a couple little tests. They have a couple games that are losable. They have Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina is looking pretty decent. And they got Georgia State next week. Georgia State, question marks on this team after that blowout loss against Georgia Southern, but they're still 6-2. I don't think James Madison will go undefeated. I think Air Force has a big shot at going undefeated. But James Madison, they are in the top 25. I don't know if they'll be in my top 25 this week. You'll have to tune in to see if they are. I still don't know if they are in my top 25. I might not rank them. I don't know. We'll see. And on to the last game of the day in the top 25. Oregon State at Arizona. I watched half of this game, then I went to bed. But Oregon State, apparently they didn't kick the field goal. They did a fake field goal at the end of the half when it was 10-10. They had a chance to take the lead. They did a fake field goal, and it cost them 3 points and a chance to take the lead. And that just ruins your momentum going into half. I don't know what that coach was thinking. Maybe people would have said different if they got it. I'm not going to hate a coach for play calls. It's not super atrocious. It's not a great play call. It's not like running the ball when you literally all you have to do is take a knee like Mario Cristobal did. Give props to Arizona, 5-3, possibly the best 3-loss team in the country. winning that game 27-24 against Oregon State. They have been really good. They're a pretty decent team. Their only losses come to USC and Washington, which were both top 25 teams and both top 10 teams when they played them. And they also lost earlier in the season in a game that was very winnable at Mississippi State, and that's an SEC school. And other than that, they got 2 back-to-back top 25 wins against Washington State and Oregon State. And don't get me wrong, Washington State has definitely fell off. I mean, they lost to Arizona State. I don't think Arizona's a top 25 team. Maybe if they beat UCLA. If they beat UCLA, they might be a top 25 team. And if they beat UCLA, that game against Colorado is very winnable. So they could be 7-3. They could realistically, they could be 9-3 at the end of the season. They don't play Oregon or Washington. They already played Washington, but they don't play Oregon. They have UCLA and Utah, and then they play unranked Colorado, unranked Arizona State. Utah and UCLA are both going to be very close games. Colorado's probably going to be a closer game too, but they should be able to win Arizona State. It is a rivalry game. All these games are going to be closer, but they're all winnable. And they're probably going to be favored in a couple of those games. And that's got to do it. Stuff's starting to get real. Playoff pictures getting mixed up. A lot of stuff's going to be changing. I have more videos coming this week, so stay tuned if you want to see how I think everything's going to turn out going into the playoffs and how I think these teams should be ranked. So that's the end of the video. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment your input and tell me what you think I could do to be better in my videos. Tell me what videos I should make, and goodbye, guys.